Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Culture Based Podcast. I'm Dustin. He's Blake. It's episode 44. We're continuing our series, Are You Scalable? Today, we're going to cover some more of the unscalable culture types that we started off last week with. It is Tuesday, May 14th. A little behind the scenes here. We are recording day of because we like to live on the edge. So it is actually May 14th when we're recording this. So by the time you see this was earlier today. That's how we live. Just dangerous. Just recording podcast day of, no margin. Who cares?
Hope our internet doesn't go out.
Me too. Now that he said it, it's probably going to happen. May just be 30 minutes of us like this. Anyway, we're glad you're here. Well, before we get started, I want to let you know that we're here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and develop a scalable team to get them there. That's why we're talking about this Are You Scalable series. If you're listening on audio podcast platforms, we thank you for listening. We're so glad that you're here. We appreciate a 5-star rating and review. If you're watching this on YouTube, hello there. So glad that you're here. We would love for you to hit the like, subscribe, and the little bell button, all three of those, the 3-in-1 YouTube action, because that lets you know every time we drop new content and gets this content out further to those like you who could benefit from it. We are also on social media at The Culture Base, BASE. Find us on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, which we got some fun content coming to LinkedIn later this week, right? Maybe. Who knows? We'll see. And then let's see. Yeah, also Facebook. We're there as well. And then also you can find us online, theculturebase.com, or you can go to theculturebase.com/strategy for your free 30-minute strategy session with us on any of the things that we're talking about. Maybe you find yourself in one of the culture types that we're talking about from last week or this week, and you're like, all right, I feel like that's the one for me. How do I get out of there? Let's hop on a call and talk about it. So let's get into it. Over the past couple of weeks, we've introduced the question, are you scalable? Blake, do you feel scalable? Just in general in life? Nothing
just
really.
In life?
In life, do you feel scalable?
Depends on the day, man.
Hear that. Right. Okay. And this, so we got into that and we discussed how there are a few defining factors for scalability, but the most important factor is your team, including the formula that allows you to determine your team's scalability. This week, we're going to continue to lay out examples of different organizational types and how that formula determines each of their scalabilities.
And there are, we talked about this last week. There are data points that we're going to talk about. And that's why there is a formula period, was because we do believe as business people that there are ways to make this quantifiable. And it's just too easy for us to have that mindset of like, well, culture's that thing you can't really put your hand on, and it doesn't really have any data points. And that's not true. Like, we just want to believe that's true because it's a lot easier to just ignore things than have to deal with them. Like, very much a lot of business owners would probably say, I'm always, or not always, but there are times in business that I don't want to look at my financials because I'd rather be ignorant. But the problem is, if you don't, you will fail, right? Like, our financials are the language of business, and your culture has the similar data points that we've got to be able to look at and understand that language, because I would say culture is the language of scalability. Okay. And so now, that just came out of nowhere.
That's a word.
I'm going to take that one. But as we get into this formula, we're going to see that not all these variables are the same. They're not of the same weight. They all matter, and they all add to different areas of how you're going to grow and scale and what you're going to focus on to fix. But now we have data points to look at and say, hey, I don't just need to fix culture to grow in scalability, but what I do need to do is I need to focus on this variable, my people, or on the vision, or you're going to find out those areas to say, now I have a narrow focus to work on this, instead of saying, let's work on culture and have no clue where to start. So With that being said, I'd say let's just jump into the formula. There's a lot to dig into with this stuff. So here's the formula. For those of you watching, look how pretty that is, right? That's nice. For those who you aren't watching, I'm now going to read this like a moron. Okay. So maybe next time just watch it because it's nice, or go back and be like, all right, it's a pretty formula. Okay. So here are the first three variables. We've got the right people, right? These are there, and we'll get into kind of what that looks like and what questions you ask when we dig into the first unscalable culture type we talk about today. So the right people plus the work, either connected to the right will and the right work, plus the clarity on the purpose and vision. Okay. At the culture base, we talk about showing where we're going. I mean, you don't have vision, and a lot of great cultures and a lot of bad cultures know the vision they have. They just are trash at sharing it. Okay. Yeah. This is one of those parts. So once again, the right people plus connected to the right will and work plus clarity on purpose and vision. And all that makes your baseline number. Then you're going to multiply that times the environment for growth and development. Okay. And we'll dig into that more too. And you're going to multiply that times accountable communication. Okay. Do you have anything to add there, Dustin?
No, very succinct. That's the formula, right? So we talked about it a couple of episodes ago. We went over the formula. Last week, we used the formula in the first half of the kind of unscalable cultures. And this week, we're going to continue this formula through the other unscalable cultures. And we'll, like you said, we'll get into kind of what each of these categories cover, just like we did last week. But today, we're going to cover three new unscalable culture types, and that's the careless culture, the monopoly culture, which is a game that either people love or hate, right? Or the hustle culture, So let's jump right into it, man. Let's get into the careless culture, and we're going to kind of give you an overview on the screen, much like we did last week. But because we're recording today, we're going to do it this way. So it's easier to edit. All right. Careless culture. This is a live fast, die hard culture. There's not a lot of self-care, very little to no support. The people are not bought in to the vision at all. The eventual conclusion is burnout. They're filled with skeptics and cynics. We talk a lot too in this about the folder. It's like a poker reference. There's pessimists. There's a lot of revolving door. There's a lot of give up attitude here. Again, because it's just careless. It's sloppy. Think of like just, you ever been to someone's house and they don't really clean it that well, and you're just like, oh, this seems pretty careless. A lot of this phrase is used a lot. Hey, you're great. That's why we hired you. Just let us know if you need anything. Otherwise, you're good. It's very laissez-faire. Blake likes to say, if there's an itch, we'll scratch it. Leader assumes everything. Leader assumes that everyone in the organization can read their mind. Yeah, that's really what the careless culture is all about.
Yeah, when I think about this, and I kind of, you and I were talking about this earlier, that like I remember being in 5th grade, and I was getting a D in math, and as you can imagine, Mama wasn't happy, and she pulled me aside. Mama Bear wasn't happy. And she pulled me aside and she said, everything you're doing, like you are super intelligent when it comes to math, but everything you're doing, you're not taking all the components that you had on this line here and bringing them to the next line. You're making very careless mistakes. And she's like, your focus is going to be not on the math side. It is going to all be on fixing these careless transitions, fixing when you go from one point to the next. And the next semester came around and I had like a very high A, and like my entire career in electrical has been based around math and things like that. So, but what that did was it helped me see that careless doesn't mean crappy. Careless doesn't mean you're not good. That's careless right. Means that you're looking at certain parts of your business and you're saying they're not that important, and it doesn't matter if those parts come with it. And the problem is you can see these numbers that we're going to dive into. It is a problem. Okay. And it's adding to where everyone else isn't caring about excellence either. Okay.
Yeah.
And so this is what we get. Some pros we have there to the careless culture. Cause again, people are doing this stuff and it doesn't mean it's all bad, but some of the pros are they have the potential to get a lot done. And one of the big things we talk about in business is autonomy. And that is like one of the reasons people like to stick around places. But the problem is when autonomy doesn't lead to a unified vision, there become a lot of problems. Okay. So there's not a lot of red tape until you mistakenly do something wrong that you didn't know was wrong. Okay. Some cons to the careless culture. Productivity is usually skewed away from the vision. Okay. You got a lot of skeptics and cynics, and then burnout is inevitable. And you got a very dismissive culture and a dismissive team.
Yeah. So as we dive into this and we start comparing the people, will, and the vision, you'll see in this visual here all the way to the right, there's this green bar that is a 10, out of 10, right? On the team and direction categories, right? That is the ideal culture. Now we say ideal, not perfect, and we're going to get into that a little bit more next week as we talk about the ideal culture and what that means for your scalability. But we just kind of give you that to give you a comparison with the other three, so you can kind of see how it stacks up against this ideal culture. All right, so let's get into it. The people. So we give the people on the careless culture a rating of a 6 out of 10. And the reason we did is we asked questions like, do they have the right people? Can they find the right people? If so, how quickly? What's their turnover percentage? Does the organization attract people well? Those are the type of questions we're asking. We do feel like they probably have the right people. They're just mismanaged. And so because of that, we gave them a kind of a higher score there and kind of that subcategory. Can they find the right people? Maybe. Their turnover percentage is probably pretty high because there's not a lot of excitement here. And we'll talk a lot about that here in just a little bit when we get into the vision. Does an org attract people well? Not really, because again, you're not attracted to kind of a mess, right? People are attracted to success, not the mess. Rhymed it.
Good.
Rhymed it. So because of all those, we thought like a 6 out of 10 was good, a good kind of bar for them on the people side of this of the formula.
Yep. And when we look at the will and the work and whether people are connecting to this, we talk about will being the acronym for want, instinct, love, and leverage, right? So are they connected to the work? Do the people want it? Is the desire there? And really mid here, not really, right? Like it's pretty mid-level, a 5 out of 10. Some probably do, others probably don't. It's not totally clear. The next one is the instinct. Do they get it? Do they understand what's expected of them? And we gave a 6 out of 10 on this part because it was like, they probably do, because they're given a certain level of autonomy to everyone to go out and to do the work. So they probably feel that, but it probably isn't great. Then we get to love or passion. No, because again, this isn't pushing to excellence, right? This is just like, I'm going out there. We're going to just live fast, die hard. There's not a lot of self-care for us. And so our passion towards the thing we're connected to, whether they're connected and passionate about the high level thing they're doing, they're losing that passion when it comes to the team organization and whether it's actually resulting, right? A big part of burnout is whether you're getting the results that you're wanting, and they're probably not getting those results.
Probably the least passionate group of people that we'll see in any of the culture types that we're discussing so far. And because of good reason, right? Like Blake said, and everything that we've said so far, it's a bit laissez-faire. It's a bit mid, as the kids say. It's a bit mid. It's not quite fire. Sorry, I'm just trying to throw some stuff.
Not 100.
Not 100.
It's
actually 30. Because if we gave
it's actually
sorry, go ahead.
The last part is leverage, and they're actually, which is their natural capacity. Okay. And so actually that probably is up there, because if you're sticking around this culture, chances are you do have a natural capacity to these things. You probably enjoy the autonomy of it. But at the end of the day, all that built together comes up with that number of a 5, which we still have as yellow, but it's as low yellow as you possibly can be. It's borderline orange.
Yeah, it is definitely borderline orange if we were going to do multiple colors. But yeah, like Blake's referring to here in these colors, we are kind of out of 10 on these first 3 of the team and direction categories of people, will, and vision. Our colors are, hey, anything 4 or less here is red. Like, you're pretty much failing. Anything 5, 6, 7, it's kind of a C's get degrees, could be better, could be worse, kind of thing. And then anything obviously 8, 9, 10 would be green for us based on this type of scale. So the third column here, vision, also a 5 out of 10 for us. And when we think about vision, we talk about another acronym again. Is it clear? Is the vision clear? CLEAR. C for communicated. Is it L lasting, E exciting, A actionable, and R relevant? And so our lower scores here are in the relevant, lasting, and exciting category. Again, because it's just kind of meh, like no one's real excited about it. Probably people don't even really know what it is, why we gave communicated kind of a 5 out of a 10. And again, when we say these numbers here, obviously you're not seeing them on our visual, but we're averaging all these numbers together to get to the number that you see represented here on the visual. I feel like it's a lot of numbers that we're going through here, but just stay with us. There's a reason for it.
Well, and the vision here, the vision is the tail wagging the dog. Okay, that's the problem here is when we talk about if there's an itch, we'll scratch it. They're completely responsive. They're completely whatever's urgent is important.
Right, which is why we gave them like an 8 out of a 10 on the A in the CLEAR acronym, which is actionable. They're always taking action, just not necessarily towards the right thing, because they don't really know what the right thing is. They're just moving from one thing to the next. And in some senses, it can be a bit like the hustle culture where it's just busyness for busyness sake, which we'll talk about that later today. But let's get into environment, Blake.
Yeah, so environment, we're digging into stuff. And this is going to be that top area, top right, if you're looking at the visual. And this is out of a 1 out of 3. The others were a 1 out of 10. This one's a 1 out of 3, kind of where we see them as a multiplier.
So this is our first multiplier. Yeah.
This is our first multiplier. So now we're looking, how long does it take to train people? Okay. We're asking that question. Are there noticeable and understood opportunities for growth and development? Do the people feel connected to the team? Like, these are the things we're asking. Is there a spirit of safety and positivity? Are processes clear and followed? Is there a coaching process in place? And almost every one of these was like a 1. Okay. Yeah. The only one that we gave a little bit higher was a 2, and how long does it take to train people? And I'm not even 100% sure why we did that, because there's still an aspect that I think when you do see that someone's going to be there and you train them, like, if they stick around, they'll probably get trained well. But at the end of the day, what were you going to say there?
I was going to say, by the letter of the law of the question of how long does it take to train people, not necessarily are they training people. It's probably pretty quick, because like we said in the intro, hey, you're great. That's why we hired you. Just do your thing. Let us know if you need anything. So training length of time is about as long as it took me to say that sentence, probably.
Right.
You're like, here's your office. There's a stapler. The bathroom's around the corner. Let us know if you need anything.
Yep.
That kind of thing. So that leads us into our final multiplier, which is accountable communication. Now, this one is a percentage multiplier. And so we're asking questions like, are the correct metrics that are clear, known, and followed by all? Respectful candor. They're not afraid to ask for help. Is this org chart sustainable? People know who they're accountable for, or who they're accountable to and what for. and then see something, say something. So some of our lower scores here would be like see something, say something. Again, they don't really care. So if they see something, they're like, that's not my problem. I'm not going to worry about it. Whatever happens, happens. It's not on me. I didn't do it. And so we gave them a pretty low score there. Sustainable org chart, I mean, to a certain extent, but mostly not, because how long can you sustain going on in this kind of apathetic vibe, if you will? Not afraid to ask for help, kind of middle of the road here. I don't think necessarily they're afraid to ask for help. It's more that they don't really think that they're going to get help if they ask for it. Because it's not really available to them. But we do think there's some respectful candor there. There's a lot of peacekeeping, I think, here, of just like, hey, you know what? Don't rock the boat. Just keep the peace. And there probably are some metrics clear and known and followed by all, but they're mostly in the leader's head. And so it's probably a lot of the higher up management and executive leadership that they know, but the people probably don't. So overall there, it's a 61% for us on accountable communication, which you can see is pretty poor. I think we said anything for us under 70% would be red here for us as well. And so that's why that's red. So anyway, if we go back and we follow the formula, if I can pull that back up, of what we decided here of, it's the people, the will, and the vision, all added up times the multiplier of the environment times the percentage of accountable communication. That's how we get our number here of their score out of a possible 90 points is only 11.7. So if we look at their likelihood of sustainable scalability, if we really take a step back here and look at this, a careless culture only has about a 13% success rate of actually scaling. That's low. That's, I think, might be one of the lowest of all of ours so far.
Yeah. It's a bad business decision.
And it's because if you just look at some of the things here, right? Like if we were just to increase the growth and development, I'm using my mouse as if you can see it, but if you, I'm like, hey, look there. If you just increase a little bit of the environment, right? Like they're probably the lowest in all the environment multiplier for us. I believe so far at a 1.2. But there's no coaching. If you just maybe have a coaching process, maybe communicate a little bit more than just your leadership team of what those processes need to be. Yeah. Maybe increase the feeling of the spirit of safety and positivity. Maybe just have a general overall more positive attitude. Maybe a little bit less who cares. Yeah. Maybe a little bit more I care around the office would really elevate that and overall change your scalability score. Anything else you want to say about careless culture, Blake, before we move on? We still got 2 more to cover.
Nope. I think I'm good.
Perfect. Let's get into the monopoly culture. I love monopoly. My wife hates it. I think there's people that either love it or hate it. Blake, do you love it or hate it?
I like it more now. As a kid, it was maddening.
I couldn't find anybody to play it with me when I was a kid. I don't know if it was the time constraint or all the math involved or the strategy, but I like all that stuff. I'm gonna dig in here and I'm gonna play this game. The problem with Monopoly, and I think a lot of times the reason that kids have an issue with it, is it's a longer form of suffering. You know what I mean? Like if I play Sorry with you, you're gonna suffer quickly. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Whereas Monopoly is like, bro, every time you pass go.
Yeah.
Every time you land on boardwalk, gimme. You know,
I know it's like the loss isn't the suffering part, it's the whole game.
Exactly. But obviously there's no team culture in a monopoly culture. And so that's what we're getting at. That the monopoly culture really is made up of individuals, not teams. It's very cliquey, a lot of bro culture. Like if you're not one of the boys, you're not in the club kind of thing. Or maybe if you're not one of the girls, you're not in the club. It's a very selfish culture. It's internally competitive. You succeed in this culture when others are in demise within your organization. It's so you're not fighting against other companies. You're fighting against your fellow teammates, really. Business is a game to them. That's why we call this the monopoly culture. Why don't you get into the pros and cons a little bit for monopoly culture, Blake?
Yeah, so pros are going to be there's a hunger for the game, right? Like it's about making money. It's about being intelligent. It's very resource strong. Like you're using all the the stuff you've got. You're using your tactics, your negotiating skills. Maybe it even has like really sexy IP. The strategy is really fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even Dustin saying, man, I just really like it because it's the strategy and I get to do this. But the reality is this.
I put 3 hotels here versus 2 houses here. What am I going to get in return?
Right. The problem is anytime there's people interaction happening in that game, you don't trust it. No. Right? You don't trust it because if someone's like, hey, I just want to do this for you. How about you give me that card and I'll give you this card? And it's like, I don't get much out of it, but you get a lot, right?
Seems like a pretty good deal for you.
Seems like a really dumb move if you don't do this. And that's kind of the same working within the team is the problem. Is when you have this monopoly culture within your team, you're getting that siloed effect where I'm not going to share anything unless it mutually benefits me. Okay. Mm-hmm. And maybe even not just like evenly, but like I get more out of it.
Yeah.
So the cons are the game is the wrong game, right? Like people are trying to win. They're playing everyone else in their organization instead of playing
the competition
or playing the big game of business, right? And so it's an individual game, not team focused. Certain people get to bend the rules. Like there's favoritism, preferential culture where like people, the same standard is being treated differently to some people instead of others. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of gaslighting and there's just manipulative culture where people are really out for their own gain. Okay. Yeah. So that's the pros and the cons.
Yeah. As we get into this team and direction thing too, you're going to be like, wow, they're almost green on a lot of these. They're barely almost green. So some of these people in Will, they have a score of a 7 because as we averaged our scores together in these individual questions, they came out to like a 6.5 or a 6.7. And so we're rounding up there, obviously, for just an ease of mathematics and an ease of conversation and communication with these things. But the people and the Will, they're at a 7 on both of those. People, they probably have the right people. They can definitely find people quickly and they attract people really well because it's a very sexy IP, right? But their turnover percentage is obviously pretty high as people are quickly finding out what type of culture this is and they're out. And again, the Will here, are they connected to the work, the want, the instinct, the love, and the leverage? They definitely want it, right? They want it badly. They want it so bad they're willing to screw over their teammates for it. They definitely have a ton of natural capacity. This is why they get a lot of high score here on this Will. I think they do have a lot of passion too. It's maybe just misguided passion, right? And do they get it? Yes, they get their game, but they don't really get the big picture. Exactly. And so for us, it's a 6 out of a 10 on that one. And so again, the Will is also a 7 out of 10. Why don't you talk us through vision here on this monopoly culture, Blake?
Yeah, which would make sense why they don't maybe get it because their vision's a little lower here too.
Yes.
Okay. Because if it's not clear, if the vision isn't clear, then they're going to have struggles knowing the bigger picture. Okay.
Right.
So more often than not, it isn't that there isn't a clear vision. It's that it's not being communicated very well here. So they probably have a very exciting vision. It's probably what attracts a lot of these A players. When it comes to actionable, relevant, and lasting, it's a little harder to see. Okay. It's a little blurrier because really they're just trying to win. Right. And sometimes when win is whatever it takes to get there, that's where things start to get a little challenging. And bigger picture is they're just not communicating what the bigger picture is.
Yeah. As we get into the environment and we're talking about specifically the environment is there for growth and development. Like it's kind of 50-50 here. Like, yeah, obviously there's some growth and development here because people are willing to do whatever it takes to climb the ladder. But it may not be the right opportunity for growth and development. You know what I mean? And so how long
some people get it?
Exactly. Only some people get it. You have to be in the elite club. You have to have the access. You have to have kind of like in the mob, right? Like you have to have killed somebody before to really earn your keep around here. Right. It's like the same thing here in this environment of the monopoly culture, training people If they want to train you, it's probably there. If you're accepted, are there noticeable understood opportunities for growth and development? Do the people feel connected? All these things for us, they're kind of 50-50, a little bit low, obviously, on the spirit of safety. Like, this is not a safe culture to live in. This and coaching processes are not in place because they don't want anyone else to be better than them. Right. They might be self-coaching right outside of the company, but not internally. Exactly. And so because of all that, it's a 1.5 out of a scale of 1 and a scale of 1 to 3 for growth and development. And that's our first multiplier. Second multiplier is the accountable communication.
And one thing I'd say is, if you're walking around and you're like, why did that person get the opportunity that I have like worked hard to get? Why did they get the opportunity and I didn't even get looked at? Likely you're in a monopoly culture. Okay. Could be in some other ones. And again, this is not like every organization fits perfectly into monopoly or perfectly into hustle. You're going to see just
some crossbreeding.
There's a lot of crossover here. But if you're in that environment and you're like, why is it that I've seen 3 other people get this opportunity? My numbers are better. My like win ratio is better. Why are they winning though in the end? And chances are it's that. So we get to accountable communication. We get to, what are the areas that aren't great? Respectful candor is not very good. Okay. People will say stuff like, hey, I'm just going to tell you the truth. And then they'll like blast you. And you're like, well, that didn't feel like truth. That felt like you just wanted to like destroy who I am. And which turns into another area. People feel afraid to ask for help because now they look inept because they don't have knowledge, right? Knowledge is power. This is that environment. And we don't want to share knowledge, because if I share knowledge, then other people are going to have power, and it's better to suppress people instead of let people get up ahead. Right. It is a culture of suppression in a lot of ways. Okay. Every other area, like, do they have correct metrics? Yeah. If you're winning or you're losing in Monopoly. Like,
you better.
What's that?
You better know.
Yeah, exactly. Is there a sustainable org chart? We gave like a 65% on that. I think there is a clearer org chart. It's just not sustainable because of not because of the chart itself, but because of the people within the chart, right? They're the ones who cause issues within the sustainability. People definitely know who they're accountable to and what they're accountable for, and see something, say something. That idea of like, if you were walking around and you saw trash on the ground, would you bend down to pick it up in your organization? Like, that's kind of that see something, say something. And they're probably a little higher, but at the end of the day, they're probably higher in their own department, in their own stuff. That's where they're focused more so.
Yeah, for sure. So overall here, if we take the people, the will, the vision, and we add those together, and then we multiply it times the multiplier for the environment for growth and development of a 1.5, that and then at 62% of that gives us an 18.6 out of our total 90 score, which is a 20.6% likelihood of sustainable scalability. One thing I want to point out here as we continue on to the next and final culture that we're going to cover today, which is the hustle culture, is keep looking at this accountable communication score. I'm just going to go back for a second so you can see accountable communication and careless culture was a 61. The accountable communication score in Monopoly is a 62%, both red, both very poor. Even here in the hustle culture, where it looks like they're doing a lot of things well, only a 60% accountable communication, still very poor. Now, with hustle culture, right, they get a lot of stuff done, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. But what hustle culture is they either, it's hot or cold, they love or hate, right? It's very much in the 11th hour. It's a last minute survival, all grind, no mind. It's the company first, the people and their families last. You can guarantee you're going to work a minimum of 60 to 70 hours every single week. It's not a spoken expectation, but that the expectation of those hours worked is an unspoken expectation. It's kind of an unwritten rule or law amongst you. And so as we get into the pros and cons a little bit, they get things done. They
Mm-hmm.
get things done. So you're going to see, because this organization attracts people who gets things done, you're going to see a lot of green here early on, but you're quickly going to see how the other things negatively affect their score.
Yeah.
So get things done. They're very hungry. They're very good at customer service. They have great response times because they're always working, right? Hey, I got an issue at 3 a.m. Sure, ping that guy, get them on it. We're ready to go. They work hard. They have the customer first mentality. And so because of that, you're going to see, again, a lot of green here in this team and direction. Blake, you want to walk us through people and Will?
Yeah, people. So do they have the right people? Absolutely. And those people are probably, when you get those people who will do this, they'll stick around. I think the thing we talked about with this culture was they were going to be like, their turnover percentage is not like horrible in the first year, but it is rough in the second, third year. That's right. When you start to see turnover actually happening. And then the harder part about that is you have a ton of investment into that person that you just lost. So I think the turnover hits even harder than maybe in a lot of other organizations. You're losing a lot of low level, entry level rather, lowering cash loss there. But in this one, you're probably losing some pretty pivotal people when you do lose them. The next one would be Will. They scored pretty high here too. The wanted is there, the instinct. They understand what they're doing. They love what they're doing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. And as far as like their natural capacity, that's hard to say here because their idea is I work really hard. I keep doing more. They'll keep me around. And it isn't so much natural capacity or innovation on how to like leverage that and do it well. It is just keep pushing. We're not even looking very well at things we can do. We're just pushing hard at this point. And so that becomes their challenge. But again, they score pretty high here as we put 8 on people, 8 on Will. And then this is where it gets harder. Their vision is a little lower. And honestly, as a 7, it probably was like a 6 point something that just allowed it to go to 7 here, because when you look, their communicated vision is like pretty mid. It's a 6, is this lasting? Is it actionable? Is it exciting? Like all these things are there. The problem is when you're looking at the vision for this one, it's always like pushed. It's always kind of like last second vision because they're so procrastinated in nature that they're not looking at the important stuff. They've pushed this stuff to the 11th hour. It's very survival. They'll get it done, but it's requiring all their willpower. So even though their will is an 8, it's at the detriment of the people who are losing the willpower here. Before we jump into environment, I do want to say this about environment. We aren't seeing anyone really high in environment for growth and development. And it doesn't seem like, oh, maybe that's not really affecting things. It affects things so greatly, because how do you create sustainable scalability without developing people who understand what the vision is, what the will is, what the people are supposed to be, and then develop people into their work, into the culture? If you can't do that long term, then you'll have scalability quick and it'll flutter out, but you won't have sustainable scalability. So with that being said, environment, Dustin, you want to dive into that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just looking to see like who some of the highest out of all the ones that we've covered so far would be in this environment track. And I'm looking back here at like chaos was a 1.6, foggy was a 1.6, theater was a 1.5, careless was the lowest at 1.2. 1.5 for Monopoly and a 1.6. So 1.6 is pretty much the highest that we've given, to your point, of growth and development, because this is the multiplier. This is the first multiplier. If you want the biggest, quickest impact to the likelihood of your sustainable scalability, attack the environment first. This is why we harp on culture so much. This is why we harp on training and growth and development so much, is because this, unlike any other category, you definitely need to have all the other ones in place. but this one right here will put you on the fast track of scalability. And so for us in the hustle culture, it's kind of mid probably on taking time to train people. It's probably pretty quickly because they need to go, right. There's probably not that many noticeable opportunities for growth and development because there's no time for that. Do people feel connected to the team? Yeah, I mean, if you're in the ditch together, right, or if you're in the foxhole together, you tend to feel a little bit connected, right? But you're not necessarily connected for the right reasons. You're connected out of the spirit of busyness. Safety and positivity. We again a little mid here as well with a 2 out of a 3 because you're working so hard. There's no way they're going to replace you.
Yeah.
But it's just you're just one slip up away really from being replaced.
Yeah.
Processes are clear and followed. Again, I think to some sense you kind of have to have this. If you're going to go fast, you have to have some clear and followed processes. The problem is because of that they're in the 11th hour, that a lot of sacrifice gets made and a lot of cutting corners gets made. And
That's
so
right.
it's a 2 out of a 3 for us there. Again, coaching process in place, probably not, because there's no time for it. There's probably a lot of talk of it. There's probably a lot of, man, we're gonna do this. But you're always so busy. You're always living in that 11th hour. There's no margin whatsoever for you to have an opportunity for coaching and growth and development. And so because of all that, the environment for us is a 1.6 out of a 3, which is a yellow on the environment for growth and development.
And I think this is where it's important to see, like on the team and the direction, to have an 8, and a 7 is a 23, right? You're starting with that baseline 23. And you're like, okay, that's really good. 23 times 1.6 is going to give you like, 36? Let's see, 23 times 1.6. Yeah, 36.8. The thing is you can have a very average team and direction, but with a growth and development looking forward and how we're going to develop and how we're going to scale. If that was a 3 and you just had a base level of an 18, like that's taking you to 54 right there. That's almost 2 times the one who had high people, high will, and decent vision. But if you can't create some kind of growth and development aspect in an environment that supports that, that's what tanks your scalability. That right there is massive. So not that I'm saying have an average team and direction, be building that because it still adds to the multiplier. But if you ignore the multiplier altogether, that's where you can have the worst thing possible, all the right people, all the right stuff, and all the right direction. And then it all fails because you're just burning people out with working 60 to 70 hours a week. And that takes us then to our accountable communication here. So we're looking at like, what are the areas where they're not very good in their accountable communication? People are afraid to ask for help. Okay. You don't believe me? Why are they waiting to the 11th hour? Why are they working 60 to 70 hours a week? And the times that get the most frustrating is when leadership doesn't even know they're working 60 to 70 hours a week. They have zero clue, which is also not good. Right. So that's one of those areas. And respectful candor. People are like, you walk up, this is like the whole, what is it? Costanza, George Costanza.
Yeah.
When you walk up and you just, all you got to do is look busy.
Irritated.
Look busy, look irritated. These are the people you walk up and they're just like, yeah, what can I do? How can I help you? And it's like, well, you can't. Never mind. I'm walking away.
I'm good. You know what? I don't need that bad.
No respectful candor there. And then more so probably on the respectful side. They probably have a semblance of the correct metrics, but they're probably not followed by all, especially in the process side, because you're just getting stuff done. And then it's like, I'll throw the metric on after everything's already done. So it's never forward thinking. It's always like, a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator. So we gave them a total of 66% at the end, still pretty poor on the accountable communication.
Right. But you can tell, like we've talked about what impacts negatively, you can also see what impacts positively. I mean, if you look at their people and their will, having those right people and having that will of, being connected to the work, gets you a higher score. Now we have a better than 1 in 4 chance. We have over a 25% chance for likelihood of sustainable scalability. Now, this is not by any means for you to feel great about it and go, great, we're in a hustle culture. we're doing the best out of all the other types of cultures. There's still an opportunity for you to grow in that, right? You still have really poor accountable communication, so you could be better. You could double your chances, honestly, just by growing a little bit in some of these other areas. And so that's why we're trying to kind of point out to you, these are the factors, these are the common denominators, if you will, that go into what makes a business having a higher likelihood of sustainable scalability. So with that in mind, we'll wrap up today. It's been a longer episode, but I want to let you know that next week we're going to get into this last column over here under team and direction. We're going to take a look at the ideal team culture next week. We'll be back. It'll be episode 45, I believe. We're still going through the Are You Scalable series. Make sure you join us then. Again, if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't know what they're talking about, this would be a series that I would highly recommend you hopping on YouTube for. Go ahead and take a look at that, and you can see all the visuals that you have there for you. Again, if you're on following us on social media, you'll probably see some of those visuals coming towards you as well. But take a look at that. We can't wait to be back with you next week on the Culture Based Podcast.